Okay, welcome everybody. Back here again. This is Junior Resource Investing. I have with me Ewan Webster from Thesis Gold, and there's some interesting and quite exciting information coming out of Thesis. Before I hand it off to him, though, I just want to make sure that I always say, as always, in terms of disclaimer, right, not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. Please check full written notes below. But yeah, Ewan, it's been a few months since I had you on, and there's been quite a bit of changing. So maybe I guess I'll just start off by saying welcome and thanks for coming back.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So the big headline news, and there's going to be two or three smaller things. I think the genesis of this conversation was back. We had a bit of a pesky CTO a few weeks back, but since then, obviously, much larger and more interesting things have occurred. Namely, that recently, last week, that an amalgamation between Benchmark Metals and your Thesis Gold, who are neighbors in the Toodoggone district up there in BC, have announced that you will be combining efforts and you'll be rebranding under the Thesis Gold title here. So maybe lots to chew on here, right? And then obviously M&A is always exciting and interesting. Maybe to start off simply, you are neighbors, right? You kind of work under an umbrella of like similar companies. How long was this in the works? Is this something that's kind of since the genesis of everything that you two have kind of been talking in the back room about this, or when did the conversation switch from preliminary over a beer kind of chatter to more serious? How do we actually make this work?
Yeah, honestly, not very long at all. Probably just several months before the announcement of the merger actually happened. So it's been pretty recent conversation. As you said, it's a pretty natural fit, both projects adjacent to each other. But until this point, they were on two very different paths. Benchmark was focused on getting the PEA completed and out the door and the economics associated with that. And at Ranch, we looked like we had a fantastic project, but it was, the question was, can we really develop something here with significant scale? And I'd say, for us, that we only really answered that last year after our drilling program. It looks like we have just as much potential on our project as the Benchmark Lawyers project. And, now they're looking to grow as well and continue expanding. So it seemed like a kind of logical time. And as you said, it really, as I mentioned, it's really just the last few months that conversations come around.
So obviously, I want to talk about harmonization between the projects, the logic behind it, and then, you're at two different stages. You mentioned Benchmark's PEA, but maybe I'm going to try to just set that aside and maybe just kind of more simplistically just ask, why now? This is, like you say, January 2023 PEA with Benchmark, right? Just on the cusp of another drilling season here for Thesis. Why now, I guess? And maybe I'll just end there and ask you that.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a good question, but in my mind, it's pretty simple. We're taking two very good projects and we're putting them together to create one world-class project with significant growth potential that collectively we're going to be able to accelerate that forward much more quickly than we ever would be able to if the two companies kind of remained independent. And then, I think the rationale for the transaction really comes down to four things in my mind. It's scale. M&A has been discussed a lot in our space and the need for it. And I definitely agree with that. And one of the key elements of that is scale. We're putting these two companies together. We're creating one of the largest precious metals development and exploration companies in British Columbia with the ongoing development on the Lawyers project. We complement that with our high quality exploration targets at the Ranch project. And, we have a very good foundation at Lawyers with, a resource of 3.6 million ounces, 3.5 million ounces, and then high grade near surface material at Ranch. Then, the second thing that to me is growth. And we have a pretty aggressive next 12 to 15 months planned for the combined entity. That'll begin very soon with a 50,000 meter drill program. That the data from that program will feed into a combined resource for the two projects. So, be a maiden resource effectively for the Ranch project and combined with the existing Lawyers resource and what is evolving at depth there with new underground ounces. And simultaneously, we'll also be working on an updated PEA that will pull in those high-grade underground ounces, Lawyers that will pull in high-grade near-surface material at Ranch. And I think that will be, each of these three things, so the drill program, a new resource, the PEA, these are going to be major catalysts for the company, and I think really unlock the potential that exists for these two companies together. And then, thirdly, the team probably. I mean, we're consolidating the strengths and capabilities really of two very good teams with a very good track record of success in capital markets and project execution. But, working towards really, as you said, maximizing returns for investors through improved project economics and scale. And then fourth, I think the key thing to me is what our vision is for the project. And really that's a combination of our three things essentially. But I think what you're going to see is post PEA, our new PEA, materially improved economics and scale for the projects. And at the same time, I think we're going to be able to save considerable amounts of money by having the two combined. It's a streamlined consultation process by just having one company. It's a streamlined permitting process, engineering, geoscience. It really will be significant savings over the coming years. So, those four things together is the kind of rationale for why, I guess, and why now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, the things you mentioned at the end are the things that jump to mind immediately, right? I mean, it simplifies and streamlines. I mean, it makes half the work of permitting and consulting. And even, when you do PE work and start doing mill design, et cetera, obviously, yeah, much simpler, much cheaper when you just have one instead of two. I guess you kind of anticipated one of my questions here because, some of the feedback and people asking questions about it online, I think it's valid, right, is that you're at two very different stages. And I remember having a good conversation with you, when we last spoke about the philosophy behind when do you announce your initial resource estimate, right? And you had said, right or wrongly, the market kind of connects and attaches itself to that number and can kind of be hard to shake that. Obviously, based on on what you just said, right? I mean, you've got an updated resource estimate, updated PEA coming out. This has changed your tune somewhat. Maybe, and so obviously this kind of answers that question, because the question I'm going to ask you is, what stage are you at? You have two disparate parts, which I do agree fit well together, but nevertheless, Thesis is a couple of years ahead of where Benchmark is a couple of years ahead of Thesis. Maybe now this is all long-winded here, but I mean, what stage are you at after all this, right? After after the vote is done and you're all one company, where do you find yourself as a new Amalco?
So, yeah, good question. And I think we as amalgamated company, we have a very good base. Benchmark has done a fantastic job of delineating the resource. There's 3.5 million ounces and a very solid PEA built around that. Now, for Ranch, what we're bringing to the table is some very near surface high grade ounces. Obviously there's no resource around that yet, but as we talked about before, the plan was to probably late Q1, early Q2, 2024. That was kind of our plan if we had a good handle on how big the resource was going to get and the targets that were going to make up the bulk of that resource, then I would have gone ahead with that anyway. I think that was ultimately the plan. If it looked like there was still significant growth potential, then probably held off, as you were saying. But I think now we really, by combining the two, with Benchmark's 3.5 million ounces with whatever we bring to the table on the Ranch project, I think you're going to see a substantial resource there that will be, I believe, very economic once we actually wrap the PEA around that as well. So very much very much still in that growth phase. We've got a good starting point, but it's going to continue to grow substantially.
I mean, you've got the tonnage. I mean, Benchmark is lower grade, but I think they still come in at 1.5 grams per ton or something. So certainly not low grade, right? Economic. So, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why I like this as an investor myself. But I guess where, I mean, how, I guess maybe rather than a philosophical question, I'll ask you more of a concrete question then instead, is that Benchmark's PEA, it's nice and recent, only a few months old, but I mean, is it kind of totally redundant now? Is it obsolete, or how much of that can you actually bring with you to the next one?
No, yeah, I mean, it's a great foundation. It's certainly not obsolete, but it will be updated significantly. I mean, their 3.5 million ounce resource they had the PEA that turned into 2.1 million mineable ounces, and those were all open pit ounces. And as you said, they were about 1.5 grams, which is really good for an open pit deposit. But this is really where we think we can add a lot of value to this. I mean, if you look at the mine schedule for Benchmark, it is 12-year life of mine. After tax, NPV5 of something like 589 million and IRR of about 24%. And that mine schedule, years 1 through 12, the first couple of years are pretty strong, mostly coming from AGB, Cliff Creek North, I think. And then you get a bit of a dip in production and grade as you get down to deeper ounces. And, you're stripping through those years as you get down to deeper ounces near the end of the mine life at Cliff Creek North and South. Where we think we can really make a difference here is taking the high grade ounces near surface that we have at Ranch and front loading that mine schedule, in addition to the high grade underground ounces that we're planning and delineating this year on the Lawyers project. And, simultaneously going underground at the start of the mine plan and also adding in the high grade ounces from Ranch, I think you'll see a materially improved economics, increased production, high grade starter pits, much quicker capital payback, and improved IRR and NPV. So we have a very good base case, but I think you're just going to see substantial growth through what will be an updated PEA effectively.
And this is a question I don't necessarily expect you to have a definitive answer for me at this moment, because obviously this is going to take months of researching or doing your own work. But increasing mill operating capacity versus increasing length of mine life. I mean, so you have your PEA. I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head what their tons per day was for their PEA?
I don't. I think it's about 12,500 or something like that. Somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And so, I mean, again, this is maybe just this for the sake of conversation even, but I mean, initial inkling, right? Not holding you to it by any stretch, but is this something where maybe you upscale your operating capacity, or is this something where you increase length of mine?
I mean, I think that's something we'd have to just look at during the process. I mean, right now the capex is about 480 million, I think, for Benchmark. And obviously if we increase that per daily production, then it will have a dramatic effect on initial capex for the mine versus just increasing the mine life. So a bit of a trade-off, but it's certainly something that we'll be looking into as we go through that PEA process.
Sure. I can't help but ask, right? But I do have some more that probably would be more within your bailiwick right now to actually provide answers for. Drilling, right? So I believe the Thesis had it previously announced 50,000 meters. We don't know where exactly what, right? I mean, I guess maybe specifically is how does this announcement change that drill campaign that we see upcoming that should be imminent within the next few weeks, I assume, right?
Indeed, yeah. So the 50,000 meters and the press release was combined. So I guess both projects would be the plan, and it will be split. And Benchmark's already announced this, I think, but it'll be 15 to 20,000 meters on the Lawyers project, and then 30 to 35 on the Ranch project. And at Lawyers, as I said, really is going to be working on deeper drilling at Duke's Ridge and Cliff Creek to build out that underground resource that already, there already is an underground resource that exists there below the pits in the PEA. But we're going to improve that and continue expanding it. And then on the Ranch project, it's effectively just business as usual. We're continuing to build out the Bonanza Ridge system and the Thesis structural corridor, which will ultimately form most of what will be go into that future resource. And that's kind of the first aspect of the Ranch drill program. Secondly, we're really looking forward to following up on discovery we made at the Steve zone last year. 120 meters of a gram, and a very big system. So that will see considerable meters in addition to following up on targets like the JK zone, where, we've only drilled about 5 holes into that, but very high grade, very near surface. So it looks like that could evolve into something pretty significant. And then the third aspect will be really testing a whole range of new targets that share the same geochemical and geophysical characteristics as the known zones of mineralization, like Bonanza or Thesis, for example. And that exploration playbook, is worked very well for us. It led to the discovery of the Steve Zone last year, so we're very confident in our targeting. So collectively, about 50,000 meters this year on both projects.
And so maybe I'll try to tackle these one after the other. But so I do like the benchmark. I know that they have a legitimate case that there is open at depth. And so those numbers, will they be working towards trying to get to an inferred category, or what's the hope there? I mean, is that it is trying to? I guess this will be the same question I'll ask you about Thesis as well. Is it, or maybe I can just ask it all at once here. Is this a matter of, I like that you're doing step out, I like you're doing exploration drilling, not just infill, right? Obviously, you're trying to add ounces here. But I mean, are you going to be happy with inferred ounces, or do you think you have enough, you have enough meters in your budget to get it to M&I?
So I guess I'll break this up into lawyers first. So right now they're underground, or the resource below the pits is probably something like 400,000 ounces at 4 or 5 grams, I think. And most of that is inferred. And we will just keep really the goal there is to keep expanding that with a bit of infill and get a good idea of, how big that could potentially be. Then on the ranch project, quite a few areas like within the Bonanza Ridge system and a couple of areas in the Thesis corridor are probably, they're already M&I, to be honest. And the goal though with this season is not to try and convert everything to M&I. It's really just to kind of get a sense of how big that system is in those particular areas where, like I said, they'll probably make up the bulk of the resource coming from the ranch project. Because for the PEA that we're working towards, you only need inferred ounces. It doesn't have to be an M&I category. And I think, we're going to get just as much value by trying to expand what we have, or more value.
Sure. And so maybe, I think, again, this is working from memory here a little bit, but last year, Thesis had 2 rigs going on its project?
We had 3.
3, think, okay, pardon me. And so what's the plan there, I guess? Is this 4 then, 3 plus 1 from benchmark, or what's the plan there for rigs?
It'll be 3 again at ranch, yeah.
And then so 3, and are you going to be hitting, benchmarks first or lawyer first, or what's your plan there in terms of where will you start, I guess?
So, I mean, I guess at the moment, because we're until the shareholder vote and, transaction closes, I mean, both companies still running very independently, although there's still very good synergies between the two, and it always has been. But, they, on the lawyers project, they begin drilling early July, I believe. And I think it's 1 or 2 rigs there. And then at ranch, we will begin drilling just slightly after that.
Okay. And so, we can, just to clarify that, I guess, probably, within about a month or so, we can anticipate drills turning on both projects?
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome. And then, so maybe a question here. So your, updated PEA coming out sometime next year. How many meters, how many meters will Thesis be bringing to that have not been, how many meters will you have after this 50,000? If we say you've got 30,000 after this year of the 50,000 you have planned, that 30,000 plus how many meters will you have heading into this PEA, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So we'd have probably about 110,000 ish, coming from ranch.
And then do you know for Benchmark, what they have. They had kind of held off. They had put a pause on there, or they had slowed down exploration. Correct?
They did slow down a bit, yeah, while they were focused on the PEA. Yeah.
And so I guess post PEA, then they probably won't have any then, right? Just whatever they do this year will be accounted for, or will be new for a PEA.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And I guess I can't help but ask. I mean, you just completed M&A, the Tududon district. Is there any other plans, right? I mean, are you looking to expand further with more amalgamation, more M&A, or are you happy with what you have? Are you talking to neighbors? Where are you at with that?
I mean, nothing really in the near term, I'd say. I mean, we've got a great district scale land position now, 325 square kilometers between the two projects. We've got 20 plus targets, like I said, that we discussed earlier, that they share all the same characteristics as the known zones of mineralization. They've never been drilled. So we've got, a pipeline of fantastic targets ahead of us where, those could turn into material discoveries. So to me, it really doesn't make sense at the moment to do anything additional. I think it would be probably just dilutive to shareholders at this point. So, we're really just focused on moving this ahead now. And we think that, within this project, it really has the scope and scale to be a world-class asset.
And so I can't help but think, I'm trying to find flies in the ointment, I suppose, right? But, is this the same mineralization based on pre-existing network, based on your known metallurgical understandings? Is this still just a single mill? Are there additional complexities or processes that now that these deposits are under the same roof that you'll have to kind of to work with, or are they pretty similar metallurgically?
So they're actually two different systems, and I think they're probably all part of the one larger system, but Lawyers are the low sulfidation epithermal system. It's predominantly gold silver, whereas at Ranch it is a high sulfidation epithermal system, predominantly gold with a little bit of copper and silver. But both structurally controlled epithermal systems. The only difference is that on the Ranch project, there's significantly more sulfide than the Lawyers project. So their existing flow sheet that they have, we would have to amend it slightly by adding a flotation circuit to the mill. But really, I think that would be the only modification. And both projects are very clean metallurgy-wise. There's no nasty stuff in there. There's no mercury or anything like that. Arsenic's very low. So it's pretty vanilla, very low cost, effective process for extracting the gold out of the system.
Yeah, good. Right. No, if adding a flotation circuit is as hairy as it gets, then that's not too bad at all. I guess I can't help but ask here. This was, you and I have been chatting off and on for the past few weeks about getting you back on here. And initially this was around the CTO. Obviously this is kind of old news now, right? I mean, people have a whole bunch more to kind of sink their teeth into, but do you just want to kind of touch on that? I mean, maybe the first question is, was all of these dealings kind of contributing to that, or?
No, completely separate. It had nothing to do with it at all, really. That was just your normal financial filings, and very unfortunate for the company. We had all our financial statements to the auditor well in advance, purely just a backlog on their end that they didn't get that completed in time. We tried to help as much as we could, provided any assistance needed, but unfortunately it dragged on considerably, which is very unfortunate for the company. And honestly, this is a bit of a broader issue within our space. I mean, it's a couple of months, in fact, I don't know how long ago it was now, maybe about a month ago, I was at a corporate governance course that put on here in Vancouver with the TSX and the BC Securities Commission. And it both recognized that there's a lack of auditors, and that it's affecting companies through no fault of their own. And I think that challenge is going to persist going forward here. So it's kind of unfortunate, but it's been resolved. There was no problems with any of the financials on the thesis end of things, and it wasn't at all to do with the merger or transaction.
No, and good. I think that people I know that even your news release has said that it was not at fault of thesis, but I think people just like to ask that to confirm it. CTOs can be kind of scary, right? So,
Indeed. Yeah. And it's very unfortunate for the shareholders. And like I said, we tried everything in our power to move that as forward as quickly as we could.
No, thank you, Ewan. Honestly, I think that unless I've missed something that you think that we should be talking about, Ewan, I think that kind of does it for me. Yeah. Do you have anything that we should be chatting about before we say goodbye here?
No, I think we've really covered all the highlights here. I mean, I'd just wrap it up again by probably going back to what I said at the start, and that, by putting these two very good projects together, I think, you're going to see this evolve into really a world-class asset, with a ton of growth potential. And the next 12 to 15 months for shareholders or potential shareholders are going to be very catalyst rich. We've talked about the drill program. There's going to be a ton of news flow coming from that. We've talked about, the following, resource, following that, an updated PEA. So many milestones where we're going to be able to unlock value for shareholders, really demonstrate the scale of this project, and a ton of exploration upside still beyond that, where 20 plus targets that have never been drilled, but look very good. So I'm very excited about the next 12 to 15 months.
Yeah, it is. You are kind of in a neat combination now where you still have that legitimate claim to growth and catalyst through development. But yeah, you are approaching PEA stage, right? And I think that this market these days almost seems like, exciting assay headlines don't quite do it maybe the way it does in a better market. But I do see development stories that prove strong economics, that they do see that response in their share price at least, right? So yeah, you kind of get it from both ends here over the next 12 to 15 months. So that's also an exciting reason. I think I totally agree. I think you are making the steps towards this being a very noteworthy and attention grabbing. If I was a major, I'd be looking, attention grabbing sort of asset here all of a sudden.
I certainly agree with your comments there.
But other than that, Ewan, I always appreciate the time you take to spend here and chat with me. Otherwise, though, I think I'll say goodbye here.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. It's been a pleasure, chatting.
Thanks, Ewan. Take care.
Cheers.